Happiness is for me a very conformist category. It doesn't enter the frame. You have a serious ideological deviation at the very beginning of famous proclamation of independence, pursuit of happiness. If there is a point in psychoanalysis, it is that people do not really want or desire happiness. And I think it's good that it is like that. For example, let's be serious. When you are in a creative endeavor, in that wonderful fever, my God, I'm onto something, and so on, happiness doesn't enter it. You are ready to suffer. Sometimes scientists, I read history of quantum physics or earlier of radiation, were even ready to take into account the possibility that they will die because of some radiation and so on. Happiness is for me an unethical category. And
what? This guy's crazy, bro.
He is a crazy bastard, but what an interesting guy, right? And weirdly, what he's saying right here makes sense. He read a quantum physics paper. See, that's his fucking creative fever, right? He was willing to suffer reading the thick pieces of information for his own, wanting to be interesting rather than happy. So it's been very interesting so far for me.
So there's two things for me. Like the first thing he said, happiness is a conformist category, which I 100% agree with, because if you look at like notions of like the purpose of life, like this idea of what is the meaning of life, and I feel like happiness is probably, if I was to like rank people's answers, generally speaking, I would say being happy would be at the top. And I don't know exactly what the justification is apart from that feeling that people have, like, oh, it's nice to feel happy. But I've also seen some economists say that, or maybe not economists, but I've read somewhere that actually happiness is actually the outcome of doing something as opposed to a state of being, if that makes sense. Like you have to actually get there as a result of doing something.
I think on that note, why does this happen? Why is happiness such a big thing now? As you said, when you ask people, that's the very common answer you get. What is the meaning of life? It's happiness. And like he's saying, it's become a conformist thing. So as I've been growing older, for me, when I hear that, when I was a kid, it was great, right? Like there were all these movies and cultural annotations with it. And so it felt great when it was new. But now, at least for me, it's become such a repeatedly heard thing where I question it. Is this really happiness? Like their actions versus their result, and justifying it with happiness. I question it. So on that note, I agree a lot with Žižek. On the other note, you said that happiness is not a state of being. So I completely agree with that. I think it's a state of becoming. We are constantly becoming that because it's never in a place of stagnance. It's always in flux. There's a duality, right? Happiness will not exist without suffering, right? We need the other in order to get to the happiness as well. The moment we suffer and like get into that creative fever that Žižek is talking about, which takes time and effort and really just suffering, that suffering in contrast creates this sort of positive or this feeling of euphoria, of ecstasis that we crave, and now we call happiness, right? A meme. It's ultimately a meme that has been spread through us to pursue. I see the point, but I don't know. I like Žižek's point as well.
The second thing as well, just to touch on, is that he said that happiness is an unethical position. What do you think of that? Because I don't know what to make of that.
I mean, I see where he's coming from. Like, I don't know if I would use those very words. I don't think I would like to say it's unethical or ethical because it's a dualistic trap. But I see where he's coming from. Happiness is unethical in the sense that, like, now the pursuit of happiness in the beginning of the proclamation, as he said, right? That her pursuit of happiness has led to this capitalistic system, because capitalism, also known as happiness, the pursuit of happiness is the pursuit of capitalism. It's associated with that. And this dude is a communist philosopher. Obviously, he's not all pro the pursuit of happiness, which underlying which means pursuit of capitalism and and money and competition and progress.
Yeah.
So
Well, I know that Žižek is, in some sense, anti-capitalist, but is the pursuit of because when I think of capitalism, I sort of think of like pursuit of desire, pursuit of wants, as opposed to pursuit of needs, right? And I don't know
what's the difference
if
there? What is wants versus needs? I've been thinking about this. You're saying happiness is pursuit of wants, not needs. But what the fuck is the difference between wants and needs?
well, not necessarily that happiness is about wants or needs, but I'm trying to like figure out if this idea that pursuing happiness, if that's what capitalism is about. I don't know enough about capitalism to say, but my understanding is that, like, in some sense, capitalism enhances or uh, enhances this need for things, for materialistic objects. Like if you think of like Fight Club,
Right.
about purchasing items that are not really necessary for one's own happiness, right? It's just things that we think we desire, right? And I'm trying to think on
Well,
this.
I think here's the difference, right? Everything we desire, whatever materialistically, also has a need underlying it. So the way I see this needs versus wants that we often say, and you saying wants is more materialistic, it's like this greedy sort of notion of capitalism and consumerism, right? Materialistic and almost addiction. Versus, I think that is a strategy to meet an underlying need. A person may just want to feel loved, want to feel desired, want to be seen. And at the age of 50, in an existential crisis, he thinks the strategy to meet these needs is to buy a Porsche 911 or whatever it is, to make him feel like he's cool and he's loved. And now he can be worthy of someone seeing him and loving him and respecting him. Different choices. I'm not judging it. Different choices of strategies that were made to meet underlying needs. So my argument is, I think happiness isn't all just about the wants, right? Like the dude getting a 911, using that strategy to make him happy, quote unquote. I don't think that leads to happiness. At least for me, it wouldn't. I think there's that underlying need. When it's fulfilled, is when I would get happiness. A very simple way to see this: imagine life is a game, right? A video game. And these needs underlying the video game are the points. Every time one of my needs is met, there's like a point, and that point is sort of like a happiness bubble, like boom. And that's how I imagine, like in a very sort of gamified, objective, simple, childlike way of how to see this.
Yeah. I mean, essentially, if I was to summarize your position, it's sort of that, well, like, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems that even wants can be seen as needs because wants are driven by our needs.
Correct.
Is that correct? Yeah.
Underlying a want, aka a strategy, there is a need that's trying to get met. So we have a need, there's a goal, there's a objective in the game, right? And we're trying to find a strategy, a way to get to that place, to meet that need. When that need is met, it's like, boom, happiness, right? But obviously to get to that place, to be on to something, to be able to have this creative favor to get that need met, needs to exist, is what I think Žižek is trying to say. There is that suffering, that creative suffering. I love what he said, right? Creativity is not all beauty and glamour and just happiness and euphoria. Creativity takes hours and hours of meditation on the tool and the craft and suffering and bleeding over there, which I think is very difficult. But I think that's what makes it.
Yeah, and also as well, like this idea that, I mean, even the word create, the phrasing creative fever is so, it has such a strong connotation to it, because I think everyone, at least most people, at some point of time in their lives, they've worked on something that is incredibly, has an incredible challenge that is very hard to overcome. And when they complete that challenge or they overcome that challenge, there's that feeling of like satisfaction, of this deep satisfaction that is, in some senses, it produces something that you could even say is greater than happiness. And I feel like it feels different to happiness as well. At least if I'm to think about those challenges that I overcome. And I think it poses an interesting opposition to happiness. But yeah, maybe we can keep watching and see what else he says.
So just the last point, happiness is, I think, what you're alluding to, maybe transient in nature, where there is something more than happiness, which may not be transient, or I don't know where that. Just trying to see if transience fits into that picture of
Yeah.
what happiness or something else, the other linguistic side. But yes, let's keep watching and seeing what Žižek has to say about it.
And also, we don't really want to get what we think that we want. The classical story that I like, the traditional male chauvinist scenario. I'm married to a wife, relations with her are cold, and I have a mistress. And all the time I dream, oh my God, if my wife were to disappear, I'm not a murderer, but let us say, drop me, it would open up new life for me with the mistress. You know what every psychoanalyst will tell you quite often happens? That then, for some reason, wife goes away, you lose the mistress also. You thought, this is all I want. When you have it there, you turn out that it was a much more complex situation where what you want is not really to live with the mistress, but to keep her as a distance, as an object of desire about which you dream. And this is not just an excessive situation. I claim that this is how things function. We don't really want what we think we desire.
So I'd like to invite you to help me sort of break this metaphor down, right? The mistress versus what was the other one that he put? And like going away, this whole analogy of
the mistress and the wife, and him saying that when you are in that relationship with that wife, you sort of desire that object, that unobtainable thing. That's what you want. And as soon as your wife goes away for some reason, this desire for this idealized object of this mistress, of this scandal, it dissipates in the distance as well. And it dissolves. Yeah.
So basically, when the wife is there, there is this idealization of the ideal woman, and the mistress sort of comes into the dreams. But when the woman is gone when the wife is gone for some reason, even the idea of the idealized mistress is gone. Is that what you heard as well?
Yes, for sure. And I think Žižek, I've watched another video. He uses a similar analogy or a similar story.
Did you see François Truffaut's film Day for Night, where it's a side story, a young boy wants to sleep with a script girl, finally they are alone, and he tells her, okay, now we are alone by a lake, let's do it quickly, and so on. Oh, I'm dreaming for years to screw you. And the girl simply says, okay, why not? And starts to unbutton her trousers. And he is in total panic. Like, how? Do you mean just like that or whatever?
It's the similar idea of we don't really want what we think we want, is that when the woman approached him and said, okay, well, yeah, let's go, like, let's go to town. He was like, oh. Like,
something just happened. There's also this sort of law of demand and supply happening here. I think the price and the value suddenly changes, right? I think when we desire something and it's something we can't get, something that, is hard to get, it increases the perceived value in our head. But as soon as we get it, the supply increases, the price of it decreases. It's like, wait, I don't really want you anymore. When I couldn't have you, I wanted you. But as soon as I have you, now I don't want you, the value gets lost. And I think this is a metaphor for all materialism, right? Or all pursuit and desire of, maybe materialism is too much pigeonholing here, but you get the reference of where I'm going with this.
Yeah. I'm sort of, so I think the perceived value and, this law of supply and demand, that's definitely one aspect of it. But I also think that is perhaps, I don't know, something feels like there's more to that. And this idea that he says we don't really want what we think we want. And I think there's even very simple examples like bad habits that we have, whether it's like sugar or drugs or wasting time. These are all things that we indulge in, that we actively know we don't want, that we undertake anyway, and we know it's bad, but we do it nevertheless. That's slightly different to wanting it, because like wanting to be with an unattainable, like a woman when you're already dating someone, or if you're a woman and you want a man while you have a husband, I think that's slightly different. But I think that idea is, I don't know. It feels like there's something more to that. I don't know if you agree.
So I connected back to what I was saying with the guy, dude buying a Porsche. I don't think that is what he really wanted at that age. Underlying that want, there is a need that probably did not get met. That's why we see people going through a lot of mental health issues and having existential crises, even
one of
after
the
having all the
reasons.
money. Yeah, all the money in the world and all the power and all the cars and everything. And there's still a hole in the heart. So what makes that happen? I think it's the same thing, right? They've chosen a strategy to meet an underlying need that didn't really actually sustain and meet that need. That it was just a bad strategy. It was a strategy. It did do something, but not just a good strategy, not a good way to become happy, whatever that pursuit is
Yeah.
as a mean to sort of idealize.
It's almost, so if returning back to Žižek's original point that that happiness is a conformist, unethical idea, and the pursuit should be something like being interesting. I think that poses a very interesting answer to why we don't want what we actually want. Because so for example, like he said, the mistress in that example, if your primary target is happiness, I think it would make sense that exhilarating feeling of, having someone, but then sort of sneaking around the alleyways and trying to see this other person. I can sort of see how you could arrive at that justification, like how cheating would be awesome because it increases your happiness because you're exhilarated. It feels like, oh, this is so cool. Like, I mean, obviously it's, like cheating aside,
Again, there's other needs that are being met, of being playful, maybe of having some suspense, some creative expression, some sexual expression in life, which maybe was missing, right? Novelty, which may have been missing in the original relationship.
Yes. And so, I mean, and also just a caveat here, obviously cheating, I don't condone cheating, very bad, blah, blah, blah. But that aside, if happiness is the primary goal, you could see how you could arrive at that conclusion or that desire. But if we were to change the primary target to being interesting, I think that changes the decisions drastically.
Exactly. The course of life changes, right?
And so it goes from doing things like purchasing material objects, dating certain types of people, or cheating on people, or pursuing certain types of careers, or pursuing money. It changes the consequence of all of those decisions. Because if it's no longer about being happy and it's about, let's say, being interesting, I wonder how that would look like. What would a person's life look like if instead of the general population saying the meaning of life is to be happy, people say the meaning of life is to be interesting? Because in my mind is, if you go on the streets, people would be wearing ridiculous things. People would be walking on one leg, would be like running with the skipping rope everywhere, or like running naked on the streets. Like life would look very different.
Right. And I think the reason why that would happen, why people would be dressing more almost freely, there would be this sort of embrace in the absurdity of life. Because like you said, what is the meaning of life? Is it happiness? Very common answer. Is it to become interesting? Another answer. Or I think even under that, I think the meaning of life is meaning. And so I think if to realize that the meaning of life is meaning, which is implying that ultimately there is no meaning, and the meaning that you create is your meaning, right? It's about the stories you tell yourself about yourself. In reality, life just is. It's just the absurdity. And when you can embrace the absurdity and become a storyteller, right? Change the story, change the narrative, then you can become interesting. I think that's where the sort of spiciness comes in, where people just want to express themselves, be creative, be people who like disrupt the dominant logic, disrupt the current narrative of how things must be, right? Happy equals to this way, this much money, this kind of status, this kind of attire. All that changes, and new expressions of who we are start to arise. And I think as a result, systems start to change, systems start to shape and create something new.
Yeah, it's an interesting answer about how meaning of life is meaning itself, because an interesting implication is that there is no conformity which Zizek says, right? Because you create your own meaning. So one person's meaning could be interesting, one person's meaning could be hedonism, one person's meaning could be happiness, but nevertheless, everyone's own meaning is created by themselves. The only challenge I would have to that, though, is it possible for the meaning of life, right? Whether it's happiness, hedonism, or meaning itself, is it possible to create your own meaning if there is an overarching system that imposes a way of living? So just to be clearer, so Žižek, a big critique on, I think on capitalism that he has is that the problems with capitalism is that within the system itself, there are problems that it can only be removed if capitalism itself is removed. So, for example, climate change, right? He says that climate change is a consequence as a result of the system, right? And in order to stop climate change, new systems have to be imposed. It's a consequence of the system, right? So what I'm suggesting is it possible to create your own meanings, whether that's hedonism, happiness, or meaning itself, if there's a system that imposes a meaning? So in this sense, a capitalistic meaning would be happiness, because capitalism is like materialism, consumerism, this, that. So is it possible to create your own meaning if there's a system that's sort of imposing this on you?
That's a very interesting thing. And I think that's kind of what's happening, right? The way I see it is top-down structures in society where this ideology, as Mr. Žižek would say, is being imposed on you versus you having the freedom to be able to choose your own meaning. Again, I think there is a dualistic trap here. And the answer we always know is it's neither one or the other. But I think we can change the systems in ways where there is more freedom of being able to create your own meaning, right? And creating your own philosophy, your own ideology, your own meme that sort of guides you. That's your sort of north guiding pole, wherever the fuck you are going, whatever the meaning you're making out of this absurd reality, this experience that we're having, right? So I think it's like meeting of two hands. On one hand, it's the top-down system. We will always need to like unite over one meme, over one ideology. That's what creates communities. That's what creates cooperation, right? Because now I can trust you. We believe in the same things, right? That's what religion was. I can trust you because you're from my same religion. I don't trust you because you don't belong to my religion. And suddenly we have othered this person based on belief, based on ideology. But I think we can create ideologies or enable systems where people are able to create their own meaning and have differences in the meaning and the belief systems, yet are able to find unity in the diversity of the meaning and the ideas that they create. I don't think they need to fight and other each other. I think those can coexist in harmony and actually create more interesting things to happen rather than things that are simply in the pursuit of happiness, whatever that means.
Yeah, bro. Well, I mean, the last thought I have, or last question is, so in using a couple of questions. So we answer, so there's the what is this video, the so what, which is, what is this video talking about? Which I think we ultimately end up talking about the meaning of life. Like, what is that? But I guess the last
guiding
question,
force and how that guiding force shapes us and shapes society.
Yeah, that's right. And then I guess the final question is now what? I'm interested
Now
to
what?
know what your
That's
now what is.
So the now what? For me, the now what is the quick answer would be to firstly pursue the philosophy of being interesting rather than simply pursuing happiness, whatever that means, like I keep saying, right? I like to say, why be happy when you can be interesting? That's something I say actively, because that allows me to embrace the suffering, the creative suffering that I think ultimately creates fulfillment, which is more long-term rather than happiness, which is more, I guess, the short-term boost. Although I would still say there's a balance. For me, it's not just like interesting and keep on being like a wanderer and a fucking creative wonder junkie. I think there is a need for stability as well, where there's that like materialistic, physical anchor that holds things down and creates balance and harmony. So for me, ultimately, that is it. The second would be to be able to create spaces where contrary beliefs come, right? Where people ask this question, what is the meaning of life? What meaning do you create? Because I don't think now we have religions or belief systems that are very unitary, that are very, at least where I am, not everyone has the same belief system. So to be able to explore each other's beliefs, what is their belief? What is their faith, right? Where do they know what they know from? How do I know what I know? And then what is the things that I don't know that I don't know, which are the biggest things, right? And to be able to learn stories and make meaningful connections is something that I would say is the now what. To be able to invite people to be interesting rather than simply happy.
Yeah, bro, I love that. I would take a slightly different position on the now what. And the first thing I would say is that when examining ideas like the meaning of life, I would challenge everyone, including myself, because I don't do this enough, to try and see what beliefs that you have and examine if they are informed by a system that you were born into, e.g. capitalism. Because you think that a lot of the thoughts that you have, at least for me speaking, I think a lot of the thoughts I have are my own, until I realize that a lot of them are informed by the systems in which we are living in. And so a challenge for myself that I like to put forward, and I encourage everyone listening, is to see, are my thoughts, where is the origin of my thoughts? Are they a consequence of the system we are living in, or are they a consequence of me actively trying to think of alternatives? That's something the first now what I would think of is that challenge your own thoughts and where they come from. And then the second one is, going off the previous video, is take us and everything we say with a grain of salt, because at the end of the day, like Žižek says, wisdom is disgusting. So I think we have to put that as like a warning at the beginning of the video,
wisdom is
warning,
disgusting.
wisdom is disgusting. Yeah.
I like it. I like that intro.
But yeah, I think that's all I would say, really. I think that
summarizes everything. One more invitation I have based on the thing about exploring your beliefs, right? What do I believe as a consequence of the systems and my social conditioning, and what belief do I hold as a result of who I truly am? That kind of free will determinism equation. I think this invites people, or invites at least me, to do some self-reflection, to see what my beliefs are and who I am and what it is a result of. And are there certain beliefs that are not serving my needs, that are sort of hindering me from being the best version of myself? So a game that I've played with people that has been really fun, and I'd invite all the viewers to definitely play this game, is basically a game where, with a bunch of friends, the goal of this game is to come up with a belief that you have, that you believe is so controversial or out there that everyone else in the room will disagree with. So, for example, I might say, I believe that capitalism is the way to create a utopia. That might be my belief, and you could agree with it, but my goal is to come up with as many people who disagree. And if everyone disagrees with my belief, is when I win the game, right? And we keep on going, right? And after that, you share your belief, and then someone else shares their belief. And the goal is to find that person who can find everyone to disagree. And throughout the game, we start questioning why do you believe in this? Because there is this gray space. No one actually fully ever is able to disagree with someone. It's been a challenge to come up with something that everyone disagrees with. And the implication of that is that we hold a lot of beliefs that are more similar than different. And what is the meaning of that? To question that, right? And what are the beliefs I hold? How do people think differently? All these start coming as a result of this game and this conversation.
Yeah,
this game and this conversation.
And I guess the final thing I'll say is that if you don't have anyone in your direct circles that you can play this game with, I invite all of our listeners to comment and play this game with us, because a goal of this channel is to have conversations with people, and ultimately we want to have conversations with all of you about these topics, even if you disagree completely and 100%. Awesome. I don't know, we don't know anything, we're just talking shit.
Bullshit, right? Bullshit wisdom. So if you have bullshit wisdom, if you have a belief that you truly believe in and you think is so controversial or so out there that no one will believe or agree with you, then put it in the comments. And if you do get if you win the game, then I can promise you something from my side, a prize.
A big
Yeah, a big hug, exactly.
Okay. I think that's everything.
Amazing, brother. Very interesting video.